Canada's top court has upheld the Air Passenger Bill of Rights. The Supreme Court dismissed an appeal that challenged the rules that bolster compensation for travelers who are subjected to delays and damaged luggage on international trips. Air Canada, Porter, and 16 other appellants argued the regulations violate global standards and should be invalid for international flights. The court's decision to dismiss the appeal was unanimous. And for more on what this court's decision will mean for travelers, we're joined live by Air Passenger Rights President Gabor Lukacs. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm guessing you're pleased with today's decision.
Good morning. I'm very pleased and thrilled with the decision. This is great news for passengers.
Let's talk about the importance of this decision because, let's face it, the aviation industry has dealt with a lot of bad publicity over the last couple of years with those lost luggages, canceled flights, delayed flights. Why was this important to you?
Currently, Canada has an air passenger protection regulation that is inferior. It is not in par with the European Union's gold standard. What the airlines were trying to do, however, is to close the door to any kind of European-style, reasonable, nice, helpful passenger protection regulation and hammer it shut and nail it shut. That is what today's decision actually ensures that does not happen. It ensures that Canada has the ability to make passenger protection regulations. It is retaining its sovereignty to do so, and it breathes a new life into the having passenger protection going forward. What Canada needs to do now is to implement the European regime.
Let's talk about, the importance of this Bill of Rights and kind of leading up to it. I mean, I just kind of highlighted a few of the problems, but maybe you can kind of elaborate more on, talk about some of the issues that were, essentially leading to these set of rules being put in place and why it was so important to have these rules for air passengers.
I would like to be clear that the current set of rules are significantly flawed. They deal with standardized compensation for passenger delay, for flight delay, cancellation, denial of boarding. But it leaves passengers without a remedy, without a compensation in many cases, where in Europe, passengers would obviously be getting compensation. For example, if you show up at an airport with a passport, with a ticket, and they just don't print you a boarding pass on time, even though you were there 3 hours in advance of your flight, that would not be compensable, even though in Europe it is clearly viewed as denied boarding compensation. Because in Canada, you will also have to prove that the flight was overbooked. So there are lots of loopholes, lots of exceptions in the Canadian regime, which feels like it was written by the airlines, for the airlines, and not for the passengers. What Canada needs now is to actually replicate the European Union's gold standard so that passengers will have meaningful protection.
Essentially, this kind of eliminated a one-size-fits-all solution for any of these discrepancies or issues that arise with passengers, correct?
So the nominal goal of air passenger protection regulation was to have a standardized compensation, a lump sum amount where you don't have to prove that you actually incurred some harm, just the fact that you were delayed. However, unfortunately, the implementation in the regulations are fundamentally flawed. There are many loopholes for airlines, and it is very difficult for passengers to make a claim, and it's very difficult for judges, adjudicators to decide whether compensation is owed because the rules are unnecessarily complicated, too many cases, too many categories, and mostly too many loopholes for airlines to avoid paying compensation.
Gabor Lukacs, President with the Air Passenger Rights. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.